basically we'll go over the budget that we're facing right now. We hope that the City Council will approve it next week, and we do have some directors and chiefs available for your questions. And as we go along, if you'd provide your questions through the Facebook Live feed, through the chat function, that'd be great. Or you can always send in your questions even during the session or outside the session at feedback@springfield.il.us. And we'll provide you those answers either through this Facebook Live feed or as we can after the Facebook Live session. With regards to today, we're starting a little bit earlier, 11:30. The governor does have his address today at noon, and it's always of interest to municipalities throughout the state because what happens on the state level does impact us locally, especially if they're looking at the local government distributive fund or anything related to pensions. One important aspect that we will touch briefly upon is hopefully there'll be some legislative change to our police and fire pension, pushing the amortization schedule out 10 years to match other pensions associated with the state. And that would it's just like you refinancing your house, and it helps with cash flow. But Director McCarty will touch on that briefly. But on the COVID front, before we start, one thing, piggyback over our last week's discussion with vaccinations. It was announced this week that the state is going to have a mass vaccination site set up at the Illinois State Fairgrounds. And it's not just for Sangamon County residents, but it's open to others. And if you are interested in registering, you can do so from 8 to 4:30, beginning, well, they're taking some today, I believe at 1 o'clock today, but you can do it Monday through Friday, starting tomorrow from 8 to 4:30, either going on the Sangamon County Department of Public Health website at scdph.org, or you can call the 217-210-8801. Once again, that's 217-210-8801, and you can register for vaccination. They'll provide 600 shots is their goal per day. And I think with the shortage that has been in the news lately, I think this would be your best opportunity to get vaccinated. My advice would be check with your healthcare provider, your primary care physician for guidance, or you can do it directly. But usually that's the best aspect, and then they can help you with providing guidance associated with the vaccine. But again, you can go to the Sangamon County Department of Public Health website at scdph.org or call the 210-8801 number to sign up that way as well. The vaccinations will be given from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock each day from Tuesday through Sunday. And that's pretty much what I wanted to cover on that front. Again, it's important that we keep our social distancing and wear your mask, of course, correctly over your nose and your mouth when in public or in the workspace. If someone comes in my office, I put my mask on. And that protocol will have to be followed whether you have the vaccination or not, because it's kind of like, I'm not comparing it to the flu, but it's like your flu shot. It protects you against some variations of the flu, but not all variations, and it lessens the impact that the flu has on you. The COVID shot is similar, where it lessens the impact that it has on you as an individual, but it does not prevent you from spreading the COVID virus to others. So that's why it's important to wear the mask as much as possible, and especially since it is still under city guidelines that you have to wear a mask if you're in a situation where you should be, and a police officer does come in and see you in that public forum, you could get issued a citation. So we don't want that to happen. But the greatest benefit, aside from not hitting your pocketbook, is the health of others as we protect each other from the virus. And our numbers have shown that we're well below the 4% range on positivity rate. Our businesses remain open, and that's due to each and every one of us that are following those protocol measures of keeping everybody safe. So we really appreciate everybody's guidance and following those simple steps of washing your hands as frequently as possible, keeping your social distance, and as importantly, wearing your mask when in public or accompanying others. So with that, we'll dive into our budget. Right now, the city of Springfield is wrapping up our budget presentations. We've done that. And our budget season, actually, it's a little bit different. We go from March 1 through the end of February, unlike the state, which begins July 1 and it goes through the end of June, or the county, I believe theirs is on a calendar year. Ours is a little bit different. But with that, we have a $130 million budget, and that's really on the corporate fund side. And when we talk about corporate fund, which we will today, that deals with the services that you're used to, with the exception of city water, light, and power, electric and water. They have their own resources, and that's paid by the ratepayers. If you use our electricity or water, you pay for that particular budget. So that's aside from what we're discussing today. Today is about the corporate fund and providing the essential services of snow removal. We have Nate Bottom here with Public Works, as well as our police, our chief, hopefully will join us in a moment. That's Chief Kenny Winslow. And also Fire Chief Brandon Blough is with us today to talk about fire. Those are the big three departments that we have that take up the preponderance of our budget. But we have Director Bill McCarty, who will give an overview. And Bill, I appreciate you joining us today. He's the Office of Budget Management Director, and he's been with the city, I think, for, about 12 years, closing in on 12 years.
10 years in May.
And so 10 years in May. And Bill's claim to fame is he went to Lincoln Community College, a graduate there, like I am. And he went on. He's the only person I know that actually went on and was accepted to Notre Dame University and graduated from a community college. So I didn't even know that was possible, but Bill did the impossible. And we're glad he's part of the city. And he'll give an overview of the corporate fund and what we're facing today with our budget challenges. So Director McCarty, thanks for joining us, and take it away. Did he freeze? I think he froze. That's why you want to call in with your earpiece, because then you can dialogue. And so unfortunately, Bill is frozen right now, but the corporate fund, and he'll jump in when he can, but the corporate fund, like I said, is a $130 million. Of that, 80%, roughly 80% is personal services. And a large portion of that, of course, is with our police, fire department, and public works. And through time, when you look to cut corners, of course, that is your personnel costs associated with that. When the pandemic hit, that's one of the things we did right out of the gate. And I think we were pretty fortunate when it started in March. Unlike other municipalities that had their budget season maybe start at the beginning of the year, we were right at the beginning of our budget season. So immediately, the directive to our directors and chiefs were to tighten the belts. Don't spend things unnecessarily. We continued to slow down hiring. So we delayed hiring as much as possible, up to 3 months in some cases, or maybe longer than that, as Police Chief Winslow will share with you today. But to do that, through that prudence, we saved over $2 million with our current budget season. So that quick action on behalf of all our directors and departments, we were able to manage that belt tightening of over $2 million. The other aspect, we are operating at a decades or well over a decade's low of employment. I know since I've taken office, I believe our employment, and this would encompass CWLP as well as the corporate fund, I think we're down probably 50 positions and moving in that direction. But overall, over the past, within this past decade, we're probably down 100 positions. And the entity that's really felt the impact to that has been Public Works. And so I'm not going to steal all Bill's thunder with regards to that, but I would like to pitch it to Director Nate Bottom with regards to Public Works, because it was brought up at one of the council meetings that they are operating at a third of the workforce that they once did. And if he could explain the challenges that he's faced under that. And then with this year's budget, some of the things we're trying to put in place while we're trying to provide services like snow removal that we're experiencing right now and how challenging that is. with the limited resources that you have within your department. So, Director Nate Bottom, if you would expound upon that and the budget. And you've been on Facebook Live previously, so I think our viewers know you, but you're a graduate of Langfelder High School and then went on to, I can't remember the university, but majored in engineering, of course. But you're a great asset, and he truly understands the importance of public service and customer service, and it's in his core. So that's one of the reasons I appointed him director, and he's done a great job in filling that role. So Nate, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor, for having me. So we actually had approximately 250 employees just 10 years ago, and a lot of those were truck driver laborers that plowed the snow, provided those levels of service, such as the branch pickup. So obviously we're down substantially, but we continue to try to improve operations through the utilization of CityWorks. Our asset management system has helped us improve operations, but unfortunately we are down, and we can only provide the level of service based upon the manpower that we have. So we try to do that. We're about 13% of the corporate budget. We're at $17.1 million last year. We have tightened the belt, and we are proposing $16.4 million, and that's through reorganization. However, we are still proposing on hiring an additional 5 truck driver laborers in order to help improve our operations. It will allow us to do 2 additional branch pickups, as well as create a beautification crew so that we can provide those levels of service that the public wants.
Yet on that crew that we've added for the additional branch pickup, one of the aspects, that's just one part of what you do. But the challenge is always, I know, on the snow removal is a hot topic. Last night at City Council meeting, and you've done a great job with the crews removing the snow, but of course people want it done in the subdivisions as quickly as possible. But one of the things, the challenges is when you do expand your personnel, you have to make sure the work's there all year round. So limb pickup's just a short part of it, and then the snow removal's another part. But if you could speak to that with regards to that crew and how that would work, where they'd focus on that, but in the wintertime they'd be able to do other duties.
That's correct. We can definitely plan on having them cut back alleys, also help with our solid waste pickup. Fly dumping is a major concern in a lot of the alleys in various wards, so we would obviously be able to be more proactive with that as well. So Public Works, we have plenty of work to do year round, and we'll try to operate as efficiently as possible so we can provide the highest level of service for the public.
Well, thank you very much. And then Director McCarty, then he's the individual that when you do add on the one side on personnel, then of course on the other side of the ledger is Director McCarty, and how are you going to pay for that, things of that nature. So welcome back, Director McCarty. We're glad you made it out. But I did briefly give an overview of where we're at, about down 100 personnel since you've started as Director of OBM. But if you'd give an overview of the corporate fund and some of the challenges, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. And I apologize. The entire system kicked me out. I had to restart everything, and I still can't get to those PowerPoint presentations in my drive. So we'll have to do this on the fly. But I do appreciate it, Mayor, and I appreciate being here and getting a chance to talk to everybody. And I'll try to be brief. There's just a couple of areas that I know the Mayor wanted me to focus on. But the Mayor did state earlier, our corporate fund is the fund that most people associate with city and city services. It's your police, your fire, your public works, your mayor's office, my office, the things that people see every day, the things that really impact people's lives every day. That mostly comes from the corporate fund. And it is $130 million. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is there are a lot of departments under the corporate fund, but there are really 3, police, fire, and public works, that take up the lion's share of it. Of the, there's the Mayor, has that up there. It's low tech, but it works.
There's the number.
Police, fire, public works actually comprise over $100 million of the corporate fund. So those are the ones, anytime you're looking at spending money or cutting, those are the departments that are most often impacted just because of the sheer size of them. One of the things that there are many aspects we can get into, and we only have a short amount of time, and I only got a couple topics that I can really get to. So what I think I want to focus on, because it really has been coming up a lot, is the impact of pensions and the growing pension issue that we have with police and fire. And just pulled some numbers this morning just to give you an idea of just how much this is growing. Back in FY11, our police and fire pension contributions were $16.4 million. That was about 10 years ago. In the upcoming budget, we have budgeted $27 million. So over 10 million in about 10 years. Is the kind of growth that we've seen. At the same time, our property taxes have only grown from 20.3 million back at that time to 23 million expected this year. So pensions are far outpacing the growth of property taxes. And the reason that's significant is because it was always property taxes that were used to pay for our police and fire pensions. And back at this time, we had enough to pay for police and fire pensions in their entirety, and also paid for some other things like the library and some debt service. But paying for other things has long since passed. During my time here, I've seen that eclipse it to the point where it was 100%, and now 100%, and going forward, 100% of all property taxes will go towards paying police and fire pensions. Speaking of property taxes, the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is our property tax rate, because I do think there's some confusion out there. We hear it each and every year about how high property taxes are and the city raising taxes and all that. But I'm here to tell you that the city's property tax rate has remained unchanged since the 1980s. This is our portion. You know, your property tax, if you look at your bill, you actually are getting taxed for a lot of different entities. The biggest one is the school district, but you also have Park District. You also have Convention Center. I think Lincoln Land's got a piece of it, the county. The city, of course, has a portion as well, but the city's portion is relatively small, only around 11%, give or take, because our rate has remained, while all other rates that you pay have been going up for other entities, Springfield's hasn't been. And so our share of it keeps dropping each and every year as those other rates go up. Our property tax rate is only 93.85 cents for every $100 of assessed valuation. You compare that, again, I was hoping to show you the graph, but I can't get to it on the system. But you compare that to other cities, we're 93.85 cents. Peoria's $1.58, $1.57. Decatur's about $1.70. Bloomington, Champaign, Urbana are all somewhere in the $1.30 to $1.35 range. And you might say that doesn't sound like much, but when you take that and you transpose it to the entirety of our EAV that we have here in the city, you're talking about big dollars. For example, if our rate was $1.30-ish, like it is in Champaign, Urbana, and Bloomington, the city would be getting an extra $10 million in property taxes that could be put towards pensions or other service needs. If we had the same rate as Peoria, we'd be getting 15 million more. Decatur would be almost 20 million more in revenue. But because the rate has remained unchanged since the 1980s, we don't have that revenue like other cities that have been growing theirs. Therefore, as pensions continue to grow, it becomes a bigger and bigger expenditure obstacle for us. And that's sort of where we are now and have been for the last several years. We have a situation where our pensions, as I mentioned earlier, have outgrown our property taxes. And I'll just end up on this thing. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions. But one of the things we put in our overview, the budget hearing overview for the last couple of years, is this chart that shows where pensions are expected to go through 2040 and where property taxes are expected to go through the same time period. You know, the mayor indicated earlier that right now the state of Illinois requires us to be at 90% funding by 2040. That's the reason for that time period. So between FY22 and FY40, our property taxes are expected to bring somewhere in the neighborhood of $520 million or so, give or take, over the next roughly 20 years, 18 years. So a good chunk of money in that time period, but our most recent projections for police and fire pension obligations are in the neighborhood of $805 million. That's $288 million over and above property taxes, what we expect to get in property taxes that we will have to come up with as a city to be able to pay our required police and fire pension obligations. And that is why it has been, continues to be now, and will be in the future, our single biggest expense obstacle in the corporate fund, because we are required constitutionally by the state of Illinois, already determined by the Illinois Supreme Court, that we must make these pension payments, that these are promised benefits that can't be diminished. So the city must pay them, and we will have to come up with a way to do that, which is what jeopardizes services, because there's only so much money to go around. And if we're required to pay debt and we're required to pay pension obligations and some other things, that means we have to take from the other hand, which is where we provide city services. So it's a very, very difficult situation that we find ourselves now in today, and certainly will for years down the road. Thank you, Mayor. I'll kick it back to you.
Yep. Well, thank you. And one of the questions is, even though the city hasn't changed their property tax since the late 1980s, someone emailed in, said, their property tax bill changes every year. Can you explain why that is?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, you have all those other entities that do increase their tax rate every year. So there's that. So the school district, I don't know that I've ever seen a year that any school district around here hasn't increased their rate. Again, there's over 60% of your property tax. So that's the first place I would look. And then you have these other places, again, like Park District and all that. Most of the time, they'll increase their tax rate as well. So that's one reason. The other reason is valuation. As your value goes up, you're taxed more. So even if you're charged a dime for every dollar of value and your value goes up, you go from $1, you're at 10 cents. If your property is now worth $2, you're going to pay 20 cents. So the rate remains the same at a dime per dollar, or 10 cents, or 10%. But as your value goes up, the amount you have to pay is going to go up as well. So those are the two reasons. What I can tell you is the city rate is not the reason your property taxes are going up, because the city rate has been the same since the 1980s, as the mayor indicated.
And then what impact the county, I think they vote on the multiplier every year. Does that have an impact on the property tax as well?
Sure. The multiplier can have an impact. Again, it's that valuation and how they do the comparison, but that could be one other piece as well. It's usually a smaller, because you don't see that change all that much. It's really mostly other jurisdictions raising their tax rates and your valuation going up. That's why I think in this last year, there was a big reassessment, and there were a lot of people rushing to the appeals office to appeal their assessments. There were a lot, I can tell you that appraisers were in high demand in the last year, as people wanted to get their own appraisals and then use that to go back to the county and appeal their reassessment. That's really where you see the biggest increases.
Yeah, is that appeal process, is that through the county treasurer's office, or is that?
I think there's a board of appeals. I actually think there's a board of appeals.
Yeah,
I believe so.
So what he touched on, and if you see a big jump in your property tax bill or the assessed valuation, you can appeal the assessed valuation. The item there is you have to get an appraisal done, which of course costs you money. But last year, I think it was last year, where they did the reassessment, they were burdened so much that you could do your own appraisal. I know someone that had done this, so they had to go out and actually do comparisons of comparable properties and show how their property value did not go up as significantly as their own home. And so they were able to get theirs readjusted through the county with that. So, but simply what happens on your property tax bill, as Director McCarty said, you have your evaluation of what your home's worth in the eyes of the county assessor. And then you take that times all the taxing bodies. And Illinois is the most, has the most taxing bodies out of any state, is my understanding. So you have Capital Township, you have Lakeland Community College, you have the Airport Authority, you have the Park District, you have the county, the city, of course, school district, and list goes on and on. And so that's, you take that times all those tax rates times your assessed valuation, and then the multiplier, which is another variable within that formula, that gives you your property tax bill. And so we may have to have a broader discussion at that a little bit later. But if there's any questions, again, you can direct them to feedback@springfield.il.us. And if we're not the entity that can provide the answer, we will forward those on to the appropriate entity and get you the answer that you are seeking associated with your property tax bill. But one of the things that the Director McCarty mentioned, of course, is with the pensions, and we all have our obligation. And one thing I should point out is with pensions. We're here to pay every penny associated with police and fire pensions. The challenge is as we go forward in the future, and I've challenged all the directors, I've challenged the chiefs, as we provide services post-pandemic, how do we do that? You know, as they expressed, you have escalating costs. How do you correct that and make sure that we provide at least the same service level as we do today? So with that, you know, who's been thrown into the fire, so to speak, no pun intended, is Chief Brandon Blough. You know, he had to jump in with both feet with the sudden retirement of his predecessor, but we really appreciate what he's brought to the table. And again, someone that understands the value of service and, you know, protecting others. And, you know, he's, again, genuine to the core. And that's one of the reasons I appointed him as fire chief, and that's Brandon Blough. So welcome to the panel discussion. We appreciate you being here. If you'd like to give a brief overview or of your budget and some of the challenges, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for having me today. Thanks to everybody who's watching. This is going to be a tough budget, obviously, for the city and for the fire department. We do have some things in our budget that we haven't had in a really long time. We do have some new fire stations that are budgeted in there, and the reason for that is that we have a couple of fire stations that, especially with the rail project, now are not able to get to the places that we need them to get quite as quickly as we'd like. So we saw an opportunity, possibly we're looking into maybe some federal dollars that'll help us out with that. We're hoping that that's something that we can capitalize so that it'll have as minimal of an impact financially on the taxpayers of Springfield, while being able to provide a service that's a little bit higher level. We're looking at a couple of different firehouses there. One of them is over in the Isles Park area, and that's in Ward 6. And then we are also looking at one out on 19th, the one that's on 19th Street out north, 19th and Converse, and we're looking at moving that a little bit farther north and east. And the reason for that one is over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen an explosive growth out to the northeast corridor, where we have the Lowe's and we have the Walmart out there, and then all the associated smaller businesses. But none of that was there, 15, 20 years ago. And now we've got dozens, if not 100 businesses out there that we need to make sure that we're providing coverage for. We know that this is a challenging time to try and get this in the budget. When the mayor approached me with it, but it was one of those, okay, we'll give her a go. But it's something that we really need to look as a city at. We have a lot of fire stations in town that are 70 years old-ish. And anyone who's lived in an older home knows that you're constantly tinkering with problems with electrical and plumbing and roofs and all those types of things. And it's no different than the places where our people stay for 24-hour shifts at a time. It's the same type of thing when you have an older home, older station. At some point, it just becomes a better idea to try and build something new, as opposed to putting $50,000 here, $120,000 there. A roof for some of these firehouses costs over $100,000. So just due to the way that they need to be made. And then anytime that you put a contract out for bid and it's for something other than a residential structure, the cost goes up significantly. So, but in that budget, this time we had about $10 million in there for firehouses, which increased our budget by about $10 or $11 million total. The majority of our budget is people. We don't have a lot of areas to cut, and unfortunately, it's not that we spend millions and millions of dollars on stuff. Our stuff is people. So when we have contracts in place with the people who work in our fire stations every day and serve the public, those are the type of things that our money goes towards. So, and we realize that it is that it is not cheap to have people ready to go at a firehouse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's that's expensive, and that's just the cost of doing business to keep our people safe. But the associated costs are your pension costs, and that is a function of a little bit of an unfunded mandate by the state. At the state level, they've said that they've made some changes to the pensions over the years, and said this is what the pensions are now going to be, and figure out how to pay for them. And unfortunately, then what we're put in a position for, whether it's me or Director McCarty or the mayor or the members of city council, then is, okay, now how do we pay for it? So that being said, I don't want to get all cattywampus and off track here, but we do. When we put the budget together, we're always looking to make sure that we can provide the services that people really want. We're not looking to to really do anything that's out of line money wise. We're trying to just keep it going the way that we're headed. You've got a really good Class 1 ISO rated fire department. We love the fact that we've been able to do that. We want to keep going in that direction going forward. Our people work hard. This morning we had a big fire over on South English, and it was cold. It was -5 when they showed up there, and there were people displaced, and they were on scene for several hours, and we're still looking into it. But our people really work hard. We're not sitting around eating toaster strudels all day. We're out in the streets and making sure that we try and keep everybody safe. So we're work at the budget and try and hold that in place as much as possible. That being said, there's just some things that we have to pay for, but I'm more than willing at any time that anybody has any ideas on, hey, what about this? I've seen this in other communities. There's a Ask the Chief spot on the city's website. I'm always open. I always look forward to getting any suggestions from the community. People have all sorts of ideas. Some are good, some are not so good. But that's okay. Send them to me, and if it's something that we can employ, we look into stuff all the time. But
yeah, a couple of good points there. One is with regards to the pensions, especially, it's a multifaceted approach because, as Chief Blough stated, the benefits can be awarded at the state level through the legislature, and then it is an unfunded mandate because the cities are expected to pay for that. So Tier 2 was a different structure with regards to retirements, but they've already started granting benefits similar to Tier 1. So eventually that's going to erode what we were supposed to mitigate with the unfunded liability of pensions. So unfortunately, that's going down the wrong track. So that's why we have to deal with the legislature. Again, of course, the administration, the city council, the chief, but also the union itself, they have a part to play in this. The bottom line is when we talk about pensions or how to service people or building the stations or providing equipment, whatever the case may be, the number one thing to keep in mind is the residents of Springfield, they provide the financial revenues, and of course our visitors do, but we have the Class 1 fire department because of our residents, largely because of our residents, our great police department because of that. So it's because of our residents, but we won't lose sight of that. We need to sometimes separate out the noise, especially political noise. We need to stay focused on the service to people. And one of the things that I'll ask Chief Blough to comment on, how much the fire department has changed, because if you look at, we'll be compared to other cities that might not have as many fire department or fire stations. One thing that I can say unequivocally, we are not going to move a station unless it puts us in a better position to provide service. Otherwise, you don't do it. But this has been a decade-old problem where it's been studied and actually hadn't been put to use. And we're actually going to put studies to use ever since I became mayor, we're more about action, not studies, more about action. The one thing I will state is I'll use Panther Creek as an example, because, that's a high, talking about property taxes, a lot of property taxes out in that area. You have Panther Creek, you have Piper Glen and other new housing developments. There's no fire station out there. They have to rely on Chatham sometimes to cover that area and can get there as quickly as our fire department. So we are always looking at how to improve that service, but it might not make sense to build a station out there. But what could make sense is providing an EMS center, or, having an emergency medical response group out in that general area. But that's some of the things that we have to think of, the growth of the city and how the calls of service come in. The preponderance now are, of course, EMS calls, medical calls, and the fire department gets there sooner than the ambulance company. And they, of course, help the individual until they can be transported if they need to. But if you'd comment on that change of dynamic with the fire department and what you have in your budget specifically that addresses some of those items like your air packs and, the light synchronization, things of that nature, real quickly.
Sure. The city Springfield Fire Department did not run any type of medical calls until about 1986. And just since I've been on, way back in the 1900s, in 1999 when I came on, we ran about half as many calls as we do now, and the majority of those are now our medical calls. We've increased by almost 10,000 medical calls in 20 years. So it's an enormous amount of calls that we run as far as the medical side do. We train our people up to the EMTI level, which means they can push certain drugs. They can utilize other life-saving factors that an EMT basic isn't allowed to do. And every day we have at least 12 apparatus in service that have people that perform to that level. So as far as expanding to the Southwest, we're open to ideas. Like I said before, if it makes sense for there to be some type of an EMS station out there that we can man that'll serve the community, then we're open to it. Obviously, we don't have any plans in place for that yet. That would be, something that would probably be looked at maybe this year, but probably wouldn't be able to be put in place until next year. I spoke with architects yesterday actually about some firehouses, and they said, well, if you wanted firehouses built this year, you should have started this last year. And I said, well, I didn't know that I was going to be offered firehouses. So but when they offer them to you, you want to look into them, So anyway, but we want to start the ball rolling as far as that. But as far as providing the services to the people, some of the things that we have to spend money on, the air packs, which is the packs that we wear anytime that we go inside of a smoke-filled building or a fire-filled building. That helps keep our people safe, so that if there's somebody that we need to get out of there, that we have the ability to do that. Also, obviously, being in that atmosphere keeps our people healthy. One of the top killers of firefighters is lung cancer. So, but we had that, and then we also had to upgrade all of our defibrillators this year. By next February, the defibrillators that we have in place, currently half of them that we have currently in place will not be able to be used anymore. So we needed to update those. And through some help through Director McCarty and the mayor's office, we've been able to secure some money to make sure that we have those, because those are things that absolutely save lives every year. We have confirmed saves every year. I don't have the numbers for how many that we showed up and they were dead and then they ended up walking out of the hospital for last year. A couple of years ago, though, I think we had 4, which 4 doesn't sound like a lot unless your family is one of those 4. So 4 saves is actually, for a community our size, when you show up and somebody's dead and then a couple of days later they're not, they walk out of the hospital. That's outstanding work by our people. So I'll cut it off there because I know that Chief Winslow has all sorts of stuff that he wants to discuss. So I'll pass it off.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The one thing on that is when we continue the discussion through the budget, one, you can view our budget at springfield.il.us, all the information's there on the banner. You can click on it, and the graphs that Director McCarty talked about, or each department, that's all there. And you can provide feedback if you want to offer suggestions or your comments. You can do so. Again, that's feedback@springfield.il.us. And then next Tuesday is when we'll have our public comment period at City Council, at the committee as a whole. Right after that, we'll have the budget discussion. So that's at 5:30 next Tuesday. But with regards to saving individuals' lives, the call to service doesn't get any better than our Springfield Police Department, in my opinion. And we really appreciate the work they do each and every day for us, putting their lives at risk. Just like the fire department's changed, the police department, they're asked to do so much more. And recently, they're asked to do, and I wasn't a big fan, but to supply Narcan to drug overdoses. And they saved a number of lives doing that. And when you're talking about a pandemic, one of the things we stressed, and, you know, was kind of discounted by others, is the impact the virus has on not those that are catching it, but the impact we're having on the actions of closing businesses, the mental stress it's causing. It's driving people to addictions and things of that nature. And that's really the underlying factor we won't know for years to come. But the police department has been thrust into this front line of service, and applying Narcan to an individual that had a drug overdose would have been one of those that you probably would never have fathomed would be the case. But Chief, if you give an overview of the challenges, because you're down, I think, 20 some officers right now. We appreciate you, biting the bullet, no pun intended, with regards to the budget and moving that direction. How challenging it's been for the police department as we move forward.
Yes, sir. You know, obviously last year we didn't know what the pandemic was going to bring to us, and we didn't know what the impact was going to be physically as well, or, you know, even emotionally or psychologically on officers, on our community, et cetera. And one thing we did, obviously, is we worked with Mr. McCarty and yourself to try to, you know, tighten our belts as much as we possibly could. And we've foregone hiring since September of last year, with the exception of 4 people that we had in our class already. So with that said, we agreed not to hire anybody until this coming fall. Right now, we are sitting on 23 openings that have been, or vacancies, I should say. Plus, I have 4 more that are retiring the first week of March. I think I have 6 scheduled for the first week of June, not counting the others that may be off for military leave for over a year. I think we have 3 right now in that category. I have a couple more who are getting ready to leave, I believe. And then plus, you know, just your everyday FMLA leave or workers' comp leaves, people get hurt, et cetera, you know. So again, when you look at it at any given time right now, we're running about 15% short on our manpower, but I expect that number to get up to around 20% by the fall, when you add all these additional retirees that are coming through the door. You know, and, you know, one of the big things is we provide services through people. That's what we do out there. And when you don't have as many people to go around, you have to look at cuts. And one of the things that the pandemic and this hiring, this temporary hiring freeze has done for us, it's made us reevaluate how we provide those services and what services we do provide and how can we do those safely. And so we've modified our policies and procedures because of the pandemic. But we also had to look at that. How do we do that because of a lack of manpower? And one thing we were able to do starting the first January 2nd was we worked with our union. It was a 12th-hour decision. We had started discussions back earlier this year, or earlier last year, I should say, about what we expected to happen, what we do if we got hit like the fire department did with a huge outbreak of coronavirus in our department. How would we provide those services? And ultimately, we worked with the union to come to 12-hour days. And while it's not perfect, it's a 12-hour workday compared to the old 9-hour workday that we used to be on. And, you know, there's been sacrifices by our membership and our officers to make this work, you know, and ultimately it was about how could we get more people on the streets or keep the same amount of people on the streets to provide the services on a quality of service level. If we stayed on the old 5-3, we had to look at, okay, you're going to lose how many officers out of being special units. So we may take people out of our narcotics units. We take people out of our detective bureau. We may take people away from homeless outreach. We may have to take people away from our neighborhood police officers unit. The 12-hour days allowed us to keep those people in those positions for the time being, at least, while we work on this. And so during the 6-month pilot program, obviously we've been looking at what tweaks may need to be made, what improvements might need to be made, or we have to look at that, hey, this ain't working, we got to go back to it. So we'll make a decision in May whether to continue with it or to go back to what we used to be on. But again, I have to thank the men and women of the police department who are making those sacrifices, because anytime you're talking about that, you have to look at all factors, and you have to look at, the impact it has on locally on our community, our officers, as well as their personal life and their families. It's a sacrifice. And, 12-hour days is a long day, so you have to look at fatigue factors. But on top of that, this isn't something we entered into, on a whim. It's something that we had been working on. We had studied. I had 2 different lieutenants look at it over the past year as we went through and do research papers on it, that kind of thing, staff studies, we call them, to come up with that. And, ultimately, after discussion with the union, we thought it was worth an effort, And there are some benefits to officers as well. The one good thing about this, officers now get every other weekend off, where before, they got a weekend every 5 or 6 weeks. So that's one of the benefits for them. But the other hand of it, is they're working longer days. Now, when people talk about fatigue factors, one thing we had to look at as well is that we were running so short on the old 5 and 3 that we were forcing people over every day for another 4 hours a day, 4.5 hours a day. So they were working 13.5 to 14 hours a day anyway. And the unfortunate way that worked is that it was a volunteer. And if nobody volunteered to work over, the lowest senior people had to work it. So what we saw, especially during the summer months when we're extremely busy, was the same bottom 10 people on the shift getting forced every day, 5 days a week, into 14 hours a day. So the 12 hours is a little more equitable. So far in the first month, we've seen a nice reduction in overtime, which was another thing we were dealing with before on the 5 and 3 9-hour days. When we force people over, that's overtime. So we've seen a nice reduction in January. It's too early to tell what the true impact is, because courts aren't in service really. We don't go to a lot of court time right now because of COVID. Very few cases are actually going to trial. So with that said, that's one impact we haven't been able to measure. But those are some of the things we've had to deal with. Obviously, there was other things we delayed. We delayed things that were approved in our budget last year to purchase, some technology we didn't buy, some predictive analytics we did not purchase. We did not hire the social service coordinator we were looking for to work with our homeless outreach team last year, even though we've carried that money into this year's budget. Our hope is that we'll be able to go ahead and start looking at that and filling that position sometime here in the next few months, and have somebody trained up to help us with a co-responder model. A lot of things you hear around the country, around the state right now, is co-responder models to certain types of police calls. And we've been fortunate here at Springfield Police Department that we've done a lot of that for years. We work in partnership with Soldier to help with domestic violence. We work with Prairie Center for Sexual Assault to help us with sexual assault victims. Memorial Behavioral Health helps us with some of the homeless issues and some of the mental health issues that we deal with people. So we do have some of those out there, but being able to expand upon that and have somebody full-time in our agency to give us the assistance we need to help the community, that's something we're looking forward to.
Yeah, you pointed out that COVID has impacted your department as well as all departments, but you had to figure out how do you actually, you've improved it where there's more officers on the street. It's been a challenge with the additional hours. But one important aspect is, of course, community engagement. How do you think that's going to change, like for this summer? Do you see much of a change, or how are you going to try to stay engaged when you can't be physically in the presence of others?
And that has been one of the big challenges. Last year, we didn't do nearly what we usually do. There were so many programs we normally offer, whether it's our Junior Police Academy, our Teen Academy, our Citizen Police Academy, a lot of the outreach efforts, our Bridging the Gap barbecue that we partner with the outlet on, just different events we couldn't do, and a lot of things we're doing now is via Zoom. Small groups, one-on-one, we've been able to do some of that stuff. We started the Polar Pop program this year. That was one thing that we've been able to do, as well as a couple of the other Operation Juice Box. We just do it in small groups. The hope for all of us, I think, is that most people get vaccinated, we get some herd immunity, and we can start doing a little bit more of that kind of stuff. And it's one of those things that we're going to have to try to be inventive. We're going to have to continue to try to do things And it's difficult. It's difficult. It's something we've been talking about, but most of it's just going to be done in smaller groups. Instead of doing something with 30 to 100 people, right now it's been with 3 to 5, maybe 10 people at the most, and then trying to do that with social distancing, with masks and appropriate CDC guidelines to make sure we're trying to be safe for everybody. But that's going to continue to be a problem. Even when we were meeting just with concerned citizens, a lot of that is being done in small groups right now. And that's the only thing you can do right now. You can only do it in the small groups where you can socially distance. We're fortunate that, we have some resources here at the city where we can actually, host something where we could have 10 people there along with 4 or 5 officers and still be able to socially distance and make sure everybody's wearing appropriate protective equipment as we meet. So, but not everybody has that option, but staff walking out and knocking on doors, doesn't happen right now. We kind of put that on the side because of that this year. That's one thing we would like to get back to doing. We also, just I said earlier, we changed our policies and procedures on how we do things. We're trying to do a lot of things via phone, via online to avoid that personal contact or limit that personal contact. So we don't get somebody sick or we don't get an officer sick, and there's a lot of people that enjoy that aspect. And with that, one thing that's in this current budget is that we're looking for an online reporting system that we look to be implemented, should be up and going here in the next couple of months. We're working on right now to give our people another option on how to file a police report, et cetera. Right now, officers are still calling them ahead of time, trying to get as much information via the phone, and then going out and limiting as much contact with them as they can by collecting evidence, that kind of thing. But we got a job.
Yeah, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt, technology is playing a more important role, but it's important for individuals to stay engaged. It doesn't matter if it's the police department or other departments, but especially with the police departments solving crimes, things of that nature, we need the public's input. So we appreciate everybody being engaged in that. And one department that was looking towards the future with City Works was Public Works. But, even though you make all these changes, as the chief alluded to, sometimes you go back to the knocking on the doors, the DARE program we need to bring back, because now you have cannabis being brought to the forefront. We need to educate our young people about the ill wills of that. But with the snow removal, especially, one of the things is removing the cars. And the question did come in and says, why is it important for people to move their cars off the street? And then if you could give an overview real quick on the mains, how long that actually takes, for the primary roads versus getting to the secondary roads.
Well, every event's different, but we obviously focus our concentration on the mains. You're basically within a quarter of a mile of a main street that we're going to plow within the first 12 to 24 hours. And then with these larger events, that's when we move into the subdivisions. Moving the cars allows our plow drivers to operate more efficiently, so that they can plow it in essence curb to curb. So keeping the cars off definitely helps out. We do have the whenever we do a snow emergency, we have designated routes that allow us to clear those main drags in the downtown area a lot quicker and more efficiently. So that's the main reason.
Yeah, and there's a map online, right, that they can access to see where you've been?
That's
you can
correct.
Give that information?
That's correct. Well, you can just go to the city website, springfield.il.us, and there's a link on the banner.
Okay.
To the snow updates, and then you can always
snow updates.
Public Works, correct.
Mm-hmm. And I know technology is one area that we're looking at continually, but we are actually going to have cost savings, I believe, through the financial system that we're using. And Director McCarty, if you'd like to touch on that and how important it is to integrate information from department to department and how that eases operations and costs.
Yeah, Mayor, you're right. We're embarking on a new process right now to replace our ERP system. It's a system that's been in place here at the city for over 10 years. It's used by multiple departments. The Mayor talked about interconnectivity and how important it is. The issue is, though, it's probably a little bit more we need for the city. It's not quite the right fit for us, and we pay a lot of money for it. So with the implementation of this new system, we expect to save hundreds of thousands of dollars each and every year and have a system that's probably better fit for the city of Springfield.
Great. And then on the technology side, I know we didn't get a touch on it, Brandon, but Chief Blough, he actually integrated or started the light synchronization program where we had modem for lack of, or device in the fire trucks, and we'll continue to do that as grant dollars become available or resources become available. So anything you'd like to touch on the technology side of things, Chief Blough, before we wrap it up?
Sure. On the preemption system, the traffic preemption system, we have 3 more phases that we'd like to get in place at some point. And what that does is gets our people places faster. I had a call yesterday from a gentleman who was sitting at an intersection out in the area where we have the preemption system in place, and he said that they came up behind him and they had their lights on and their horns are going, and didn't understand why they were honking at him because the light was red, and then it turned green. And so people keep in mind, when you're in these areas where we do have these this traffic preemption system in place, if you see those lights and sirens behind you, look at the lights, because there's a good chance that they're going to change for you if you're sitting at one of those intersections where we have that in place. So that's what they're supposed to do is turn red lights green, so that you can go through there safely. Our apparatus can get by you and go to wherever we need to go to help somebody. So keep that in mind, especially on the west side, and look for it to come. We'll do a lot of PR stuff on the other phases when we get to that point.
That's a good point, because if you're a stoplight and you hear the sirens coming at you, you have no place to go, but keep an eye on the light. If it changes, then take your turn to move over. So that's important. As we do get resources, we will expand that for the police cars as well, so they'd be able to synchronize the lights as they go through, and it protects everybody, keeps everybody safer when they're responding to the calls. But I really appreciate each one of you joining us today. I know that's a brief overview, kind of thrust upon everybody, but those of you that are watching, if you go to springfield.il.us, take a look at the budget, and if there's any questions or comments, be sure to either contact your alderman or the mayor's office at 789-2200. Of course, for snow emergencies, you can contact Public Works at 789-2255. But with regards to emailing questions or comments, you can do that at feedback@springfield.il.us. If you want to sign up to speak at the city council meeting, either in person, preferably in person, but on Zoom, you can contact the city clerk's office. That number is 789-2216. Again, that's 789-2216. And that public meeting, as a reminder for our budget, is this upcoming Tuesday, February 23rd at 5:30. You can do so in person, or if you want to submit it in writing, you may do so as well. But again, a reminder about the vaccinations. It's very exciting that the state of Illinois is opening up a vaccination site, a mass vaccination site with 600 vaccines a day out at the fairgrounds. And beginning tomorrow, you can register online from 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. The shots will be given from 9 to 1, Tuesday through Sunday. But the best way to register is either by calling 210, and that's area code 217-210-8801, or go online at scdph.org. That's the Sangamon County Department of Public Health, those initials.org. But as always, once you do get vaccinated, or even if you don't, we appreciate everybody's diligence of treating everybody with respect, making sure you're keeping your social distance, washing your hands as frequently as possible. And my personal favorite, of course, since the city mandate, is wear your mask when in public, over your nose and mouth, and keep everybody safe, and we'll keep our businesses open. So we appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you'll tune in next week at this time for Facebook Live. And until then, let's make today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Stay warm.